Hey yo prodigies, I just wanted to talk to you about some theories that I've been seeing across my different social accounts and on YouTube comments and whatnot. These mainly have to do with the true identity of Ink Bendy and the true identity of the Alice Angel and the Boris that we see at the end of chapter 4. This video is not going to be highly edited like they usually are, I just want to have a chill discussion. So for those who want to watch something, I'll just overlay some gameplay of Bendy. I hope you don't mind that, but these theories in particular are ones that I'm just not passionate about. But people constantly want to hear my thoughts about this, they keep on mentioning it, so I'm making this video now, and if anybody sees comments like that, please help me out and link that person to this video. So let's start with a big one. Is Joey Drew Ink Bendy? This is a theory that I brought up around early last year, maybe around the beta or chapter 2 days, I can't exactly remember. And it was really fun to think about at the time, but nowadays it's not so much. It's just been way outdated by the latest chapter. And the main idea of it is that Joey Drew wanted to become Bendy so that he could achieve immortality. But across all of the chapters to date, there's one major thing we all have to look at before we can decide whether this is true. And that is something that we can see in the major ink workers that they all have in common. So if you look very carefully, all of the ink workers become an inky form of an obsession or something negative that they experienced at the studio. We can see that Sammy's encased in a prison, which is what he saw his office like. We've seen that Susie Campbell becomes a ruined Alice Angel and Norman becomes a walking projector. We've also seen that Jack Fane becomes that which runs through the sewers. That's one major thing to note. With this in mind, we have to realize that if Joey Drew was to become an ink worker, that is if he even became an ink worker, he would have to transform into something that he's passionate about. And judging from the audio in chapter 4, he doesn't really seem that passionate about dreams coming true. He doesn't really seem that passionate about dreaming, and he doesn't really seem that passionate about Bendy altogether. He actually seems like a very sneaky villain who appears to be very nice on the surface, but behind closed doors, he's a really nasty person. And this is further evidence with Susie Campbell's recording in chapter 4. So if he did become an ink worker, what did he change into? An inky librarian? Maybe he became one of those portraited people that I mentioned in my chapter 5 analysis video. It just becomes this weird piece of information to consider because we don't really have that much going on for Joey Drew. Another thing that I want to address in this topic is the corpses of the fallen enemies that we've seen so far. If you look really carefully, the insignificant ones end up disappearing after you destroy them, and the major ones leave something unique to their characters behind. So for Sammy, we see that he leaves behind a mask and an ink puddle. Norman leaves behind his body. Alice Angel leaves behind her body, and Jack Fane leaves behind a hat and possibly a piece of himself under the box that we crush him with. So it looks like the ones who disappear are just disposable clones of something, whether that be a searcher or a cartoon. That means until we get to destroy Bendy, there's really no way for us to tell for sure. But at the moment, I'm fairly convinced that Bendy is just an imperfect version of something that Joey tried to create, but failed, like most of the other toons at the studio. I'm also wondering whether or not Joey actually became an ink being too, or did he sacrifice his co-workers first before going that far? And in this respect, perhaps only chapter 5 will tell. But guess what that also means? Wally Franks is also not Ink Bendy, and he's not Brute Boris either. Now I often get comments saying that Wally Franks is Bendy or Boris, and no one can really give solid evidence for it. Again, this is something that I proposed ages ago, and it seemed to hold up until chapter 4 came around, so I'm really not sure why it's still a thing. I asked a few people about it, and they bring up points like he was a hardworking character, which is just not true according to Lacey Benton in chapter 4, who calls everybody else moronic slackers. Also, Wally goes out of his way to avoid doing too much work, which is proven in his audio tape in chapter 4. But most of all, Brute Boris disappears when we defeat him. Now remember, what did we learn about minor creations and clones? That's right, they disappear when they're destroyed. With this said, Wally isn't Ink Bendy either because there's just no solid evidence for it. So on this side of things, I've been told that the action figures have items related to the workers, but that's super dangerous thinking because it isn't directly related to the events of the game, and it's really just for fun. For example, how can the strong Wally Franks' Bendy supporters and the strong Wally Franks' Boris supporters come to a conclusion when both the Ink Bendy and Boris action figures have items all related to Wally in some respects? I really just think that no one is Ink Bendy right now. He is his own character who will fade away when we finally get to destroy him, if we finally get to destroy him. But I'm also sensible enough to say that there isn't much evidence for that either. So really, it's inconclusive. We just don't have enough evidence for or against it, but the evidence I've been hearing about so far has been really kinda weak. With all this being said, you may be curious about the Alice and Boris that we see at the end of chapter 4. Now, most people who have talked to me about this say that they are Alison Pendle and Thomas Connor, because that's the name of their models in the game files. Well, I looked at the game files, and this is just not true. The names of the Alice and Boris models and every other model are just standard names, such as Alice_model, model_Boris, Alice_Z_model, Boris_Z_model, model_Bendy_CH5, standing for chapter 5, and I'm sure you get the point, it keeps going on like that for each of the models. However, I do have some slightly more complicated information that I might go deeper into in a future theory video that might say the opposite, but those are just the facts for now, and those are just my thoughts on that. With that being said, remember that themeatly dropped new chapter 5 achievements recently, which I covered in this video, or you could check out these videos which were picked just for you. If you're new, remember to subscribe and tap that bell for more bendy and horror game theories that actually make sense, and prodigies, I hope these videos help to expand on how you think. See ya!